I had no car, no money, and no time. I slipped carrying my son, asked him for help, but he drove away.
Have you ever walked into a room and felt injustice hanging in the very air you breathe? In all my years sitting on this bench, I have seen thousands of con artists, scammers, and people trying to cheat the system with expensive suits and polished lies. But today's case began with something no one expected. It wasn't a thick file of evidence or a bank statement. It was an old, dirty, heartbreaking object placed inside a clear plastic bag, a single child's shoe, caked in dried mud. Look at the plaintiff, Mark Sullivan, a 5-year-old successful businessman in a $2,000 suit with hair slicked back to perfection. He stands there with a smirk of pure entitlement, suing the woman across from him for $10,000. Why? For a scratch on his luxury car. He looks at that muddy shoe on the table with total disgust, as if it's a piece of trash polluting his polished world. This is the physiognomy of ego, a man who doesn't see human beings. He only sees numbers and his own wounded pride. But now, look at the defendant, Elena, a single mother with rough, calloused hands, the physical map of a woman who works back-to-back shifts at a commercial laundry. She doesn't look at the cameras. She doesn't even look at me. Her eyes are locked on that shoe. In those eyes, there isn't anger. There is only a profound, hollow pain, a trembling silence that only those who have tasted the very bottom of adversity can truly understand. Judge Judy. Mark begins in a condescending tone. This woman allowed her child to run wild and damage my property. $10,000 is the bare minimum for this level of negligence. She needs to learn a lesson about responsibility. I look at him. I look at the way he carries himself, shoulders back, chin tilted up, dripping with arrogance. Silence. I snap, and the sound of my gavel cuts through his smugness like a knife. Mr. Ronald Sullivan, you are talking about a scratch on a piece of metal. I am looking at a broken, worn-out shoe. Do you have any idea why this shoe is covered in mud? Do you have any idea why a mother would bring something like this into my courtroom instead of an apology? Elena finally raises her head. A single tear tracks down her gaunt cheek. She doesn't try to make excuses for the scratch. She just grips the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. Your Honor, she whispers, her voice cracking under the weight of 1,000 heartbreaks. That was the last shoe my son ever wore. On that night, I didn't bring it here to deny what happened. I brought it so he could see. So he could understand why I don't have $10,000 to give him. The entire courtroom goes deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Mark Sullivan keeps that smirk on his face, but he has no idea that behind that muddy shoe lies a truth that will melt even the hardest heart. He doesn't realize that his own arrogance is about to become the very noose that tightens around his case. The courtroom air remains heavy, thick with the scent of old wood and the unspoken tension of a man who thinks he's already won. Mark Sullivan crosses his arms, leaning back with a smug expression that screams, I am the victim here, but I've lived long enough to know that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the one telling the truth. I turn my gaze toward Elena. I want to see past the exhaustion. I want to read the map written on her face. Speak, Elena, I say, my voice firm but dropping the edge of steel. Tell me about the night that scratch appeared on his precious car. And tell me why you brought a muddy shoe to a $10,000 lawsuit. Elena takes a shallow, shaky breath. She reaches out and touches the plastic bag containing the shoe, her fingers trembling as if she's touching something sacred. This isn't just rubber and canvas to her. It's a relic. It was raining, Your Honor, she begins, her voice barely a whisper yet echoing in the silence. The kind of freezing New England rain that turns the world into ice. My son Leo, he's 7. He's been fighting a respiratory infection for weeks. That night, his fever spiked to 104. He couldn't breathe. His face was turning a shade of blue I pray no parent ever has to see. She pauses, wiping a stray tear with the back of a hand that is red and raw from harsh detergents. I don't have a car. I don't have money for an Uber. I called 911, but they said there was a massive pileup on the highway. It would be 30 minutes. I knew Leo didn't have 30 minutes, so I grabbed him. I wrapped him in my only coat and I ran. I ran 3 miles toward the clinic. The smirk on Mark Sullivan's face falters just for a second. I was halfway there when my legs gave out, Elena continues. I slipped on the ice near a parking lot. Leo fell. He lost his shoe in the slush. I was screaming for help, but the streets were empty. Then I saw his car idling in a driveway. I didn't want to hurt his property. I just needed to lean Leo against the hood for 1 second so I could adjust my grip and keep him from hitting the pavement again. I was crying, begging for him to open the door, to just drive us 2 blocks to the ER. But the windows stayed up. He just honked the horn at me to get away from his paint job and drove off. I look at Mark Sullivan. His face has turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. This is the physiognomy of a coward exposed. The scratch wasn't from a vandal. It was from a dying child's zipper as a terrified mother tried to save his life. Is this true, Mr. Sullivan? I ask. My voice is quiet now, and that is when I am most dangerous. Did you see a woman in the freezing rain with a blue-faced child and decide your car's wax finish was more important than a human heartbeat? Mark stammers, his arrogance collapsing like a house of cards. I thought she was a panhandler, Your Honor. People try to scam you all the time. I didn't know the kid was sick. A scratch is a scratch. I have a right to my property. He still doesn't get it. He's standing in a room full of people who are looking at him like he's a monster, and all he can talk about is his rights. But the real secret of that night is about to come out, and it's written in the mud on that shoe. The courtroom is frozen, suspended in a moment of raw realization. Judge Judy leans forward, her sharp eyes scanning the medical papers with a precision that would make a surgeon sweat. But this time her gaze isn't looking for a lie, it's looking at the cost of a life. Mark Sullivan shifts his weight, looking at his gold watch as if he has somewhere more important to be than listening to a mother talk about her child's survival. So, Elena, I say, my voice steady but carrying the weight of the gravity in the room. You made it to the clinic. You carried your son through the freezing mud, wearing only one shoe, while Mr. Sullivan drove away to protect his paint job. Tell the court what happened next. Elena's voice is stronger now, fueled by the memory of that night's terror. The doctors said if I had been 5 minutes later, Leo's lungs would have shut down completely. They stabilized him, but he spent 3 weeks in the pediatric intensive care unit. He had severe pneumonia on top of the infection. He lived, Your Honor. He's alive. But the cost of saving him was more than I could ever earn in a lifetime. She pulls out another document, not a muddy shoe this time, but a hospital summary. The bill came to $92,000. I work 60 hours a week, and I barely take home enough for rent and groceries. I've been paying them $50 a month, every month. It's all I can do. But then I got sued for $10,000 more because I dared to touch a rich man's car while trying to keep my son from dying on the sidewalk. I look at the numbers on that bill. $92,000. In this country, we tell people to work hard and play by the rules, but we don't tell them that one bad night of freezing rain can bury them in debt until the day they die. This is the physiognomy of a system failing the honest. Mr. Sullivan, I turn my head slowly toward the plaintiff. The silence that follows is deafening. You are suing this woman, who is already buried under nearly $100,000 of medical debt for saving her son's life, for $10,000. For a scratch? A scratch that, by the way, your insurance would likely cover for a $500 deductible. Am I correct? Mark bristles, his face flushing a deep, angry red. That's not the point, Judge. It's the principle. You can't just go around touching people's property. If she can't afford a child, that shouldn't be my problem. I pay my taxes. I worked hard for that car. Why should I have to look at a blemish on my hood because she chose to live in a neighborhood without a car? The gallery gasps. A woman in the back row let out a soft cry of disbelief. Even the bailiff, who has seen it all, has to look away to maintain his composure. The principal, Mr. Sullivan? I lean in closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You want to talk about principals in my courtroom? You saw a mother screaming for help in a storm. You heard her banging on your window while her child's face was blue. And your principal was to honk your horn and drive away. You didn't just ignore her. You treated her like she was invisible, like her son's life had less value than your clear coat. I look back at the muddy shoe on the bench. It's a tiny thing, worn at the toe, caked in the earth of a night that almost ended in a funeral. Mark Sullivan sees a bill. Elena sees a miracle. But I see a truth that is about to emerge, a truth about a mother's secret that goes even deeper than a hospital bill. The tension in the room shifts from a simmer to a boil. Judge Judy leans back, her eyes narrowing as she studies Mark Sullivan's reaction. He's looking at the exit, his foot tapping a nervous, erratic rhythm against the floor. This is the physiognomy of a man whose secret is leaking out. Mr. Sullivan, I say, my voice dropping to a register that signals a storm is coming. You said earlier that you thought Elena was a panhandler. You said you didn't open your door because you were afraid of being scammed. But there's a detail in the police report from that night that doesn't quite add up with your story of being a lone victim. Mark stiffens. His hand goes instinctively to his tie, straightening it even though it's perfectly in place. The report states that when you drove away, a witness saw someone else in your passenger seat. I continue, my eyes never leaving his face. In fact, the witness claims you weren't just protecting your car, you were arguing with someone who was pointing at the woman in the rain, someone who was begging you to stop. Elena gasps, her hand flying to her mouth. She looks at Mark, her eyes wide with a new kind of shock. Who was in the car, Mr. Sullivan? I demand. And don't you dare lie to me. If you lie in my courtroom, I will make sure you regret it before the sun sets. Mark's face drains of all color. He looks like a ghost. It was my mother, he stammers, his voice losing its edge of steel. She's 80. She has dementia. She didn't know what was going on. She was just confused, hitting the dashboard. I was trying to keep her calm. I couldn't let some stranger reach into the car and scare her. The irony is so thick it's suffocating. He's using his mother, a woman the same age as many of you watching this, as a shield for his own cowardice. He's claiming he was protecting an elderly woman while he ignored a mother and a dying child. Your mother, I repeat, the words tasting like vinegar. So, you're telling this court that while your own mother sat beside you, witnessing the desperation of another human being, you decided to use her condition as an excuse for your lack of humanity? You ignored a mother's cry for help while sitting next to your own? I turned to Elena. Did you see his mother, Elena? I saw a face in the window, Elena whispers, her voice thick with tears. I saw an old woman pressing her hands against the glass. She looked horrified. I thought she was trying to reach for the door handle. I thought help was coming. But then the engine roared, and the car just vanished into the dark. I look back at Mark. The principal he was so proud of just minutes ago is now exposed for what it truly is, a hollow mask for a soul that has forgotten what it means to be part of a community. You didn't just drive away from a stranger, Mr. Sullivan, I say, my voice cold and sharp. You showed your own mother that her son is a man who values a paint job over a child's breath. You gave her a front row seat to your own moral bankruptcy. But the reveal isn't over, because the muddy shoe on my desk has one more story to tell, a story about where that shoe actually came from, and why Elena isn't just a victim, but a hero who did the one thing Mark Sullivan could never understand. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifts from anger to a somber, hollow silence. Judge Judy leans forward, her eyes softened, but her focus sharper than ever. She picks up the plastic bag containing the muddy shoe, holding it not as a piece of evidence, but as a storyteller's key. Mark Sullivan is looking down at his polished leather loafers, unable to meet the gaze of anyone in the room. This is the physiognomy of a man realizing he is small, despite the size of his bank account. Elena, I say, my voice carrying a quiet authority that demands the truth. This shoe, it's not just dirty, it's old, it's been repaired. Tell me the story of this shoe, because I suspect it means more than $10,000 to you. Elena looks at the shoe, a faint, heartbreaking smile ghosting across her lips for the first time. Your Honor, that shoe was a gift. Not from me. Leo's father, he was a first responder. He passed away 3 years ago in the line of duty. He bought those shoes for Leo just weeks before he died. He told Leo they were magic shoes, that they could make him run faster than the wind and keep him safe no matter where he went. The gallery draws a collective breath. The weight of the loss in this woman's life is staggering. First a husband, now nearly a son, and all the while she is being hunted for a scratch on a bumper. Leo refused to wear any other pair, Elena continues, her voice trembling with a mix of pride and sorrow. Even when they got tight, even when the soles started to peel, he said they were his connection to his daddy. I spent hours gluing them back together, cleaning them by hand. That night in the rain, when he lost the shoe in the mud, he wasn't crying because he was sick. He was crying because he thought he had lost his father again. I went back for it the next morning. I dug through the freezing sludge for 2 hours until I found it. It was the only thing that gave him the strength to keep fighting in that hospital bed. I turned my head toward Mark Sullivan. His face is no longer pale. It is a mask of pure shame. He looks like a man who just realized he's been suing a widow and an orphan over a blemish on a machine. This is the physiognomy of a soul's awakening, though it comes far too late to save his reputation. Mr. Sullivan, I say, and the chill in my voice could freeze the Atlantic. You called this shoe trash. You complained that it was polluting your world. You wanted $10,000 for a scratch caused by a child who was wearing his dead father's magic shoes while fighting for his very last breath. Tell me, sir, How much is a dead hero's memory worth to you? Does it cover the cost of your repair bill? Mark opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. For the first time, the principle he fought for looks like a mountain of garbage. He is no longer the successful businessman. He is just a man who chose a car over a legacy. But the truth about this mother goes even deeper. Because Elena didn't just bring the shoe to prove she was poor. She brought it to reveal a secret about that night, a secret that involves the very car Mark was so desperate to protect. The air in the courtroom is so thin, it feels as though the oxygen has been sucked out. Judge Judy sits perfectly still, her hands folded on the bench, her gaze fixed on Mark Sullivan. He is sweating now, not the sweat of a man who is hot, but the cold, oily perspiration of a man who knows his lie has reached its expiration date. This is the physiognomy of a predator turned prey. Mr. Sullivan, I begin, my voice as cold as the rain Elena ran through that night. You were very vocal about your rights and your paint job. You were very certain that Elena was a scammer, but there is a piece of technology you seem to have forgotten about. Your vehicle, that luxury car you love more than human life, is equipped with a 360-degree factory-installed dashcam system, a system that records even when the engine is idling. Mark's eyes widen. He opens his mouth, but only a dry, clicking sound comes out. His polished exterior is cracking, revealing the hollow core beneath. I subpoenaed the footage from your car's cloud storage this morning. I continue, leaning forward until I am just inches from the microphone. And I watched it. I watched the whole thing. I didn't just see a scratch being made. I saw a tragedy in high definition. I turn to the monitor in the courtroom. Play the clip, I command. The screen flickers to life. The footage is grainy from the rain, but the audio is crystal clear. You can hear the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers. You can hear the muffled sound of a woman screaming for help, and then you hear a voice inside the car. It's an elderly woman, Mark's mother. She is crying. Mark, please, stop. That baby. Look at that baby. He's not breathing right. Open the door, Mark. Please help them. Then Mark's voice rings out, sharp and dripping with venom. Shut up, Mom. She's just a junkie looking for a payout. Look at her, she's touching the hood. She's going to scratch the ceramic coating. I'm not letting some trash ruin this car. We're leaving. The courtroom erupts in a chorus of gasps and cries of shame. I slam my gavel 3 times, the sound echoing like gunshots. Silence. I turn back to the monitor. The footage shows Elena leaning Leo against the car. You can see his small, pale hand sliding down the hood as his mother tries to get a better grip. That was the scratch. That was the $10,000 crime. Then the car lurches forward, nearly knocking Elena and her sick child into the gutter as Mark speeds away. You didn't just ignore her, Mr. Sullivan, I say, my voice trembling with a rare, righteous anger. You lied to this court. You said you were protecting your mother, but the footage shows your mother was the only one in that car with a soul. She was begging you to be a human being, and you chose to be a narcissist. You chose a clear coat of wax over the life of a child whose father died protecting people like you. I look at Elena. She is shaking, her face buried in her hands. She isn't watching the screen. She doesn't need to. She lived it. Mr. Sullivan, I say, and the silence that follows is the heaviest of all. You brought this lawsuit to teach a lesson. Well, the school is now in session, and you are about to find out that the tuition is much higher than $10,000. But the final blow hasn't landed yet, because when I looked at that dashcam footage, I saw something else, something that happened just seconds before Mark drove away, something that changes the legal standing of this entire case. The silence in the courtroom is no longer just heavy, it is suffocating. Mark Sullivan stands frozen, his eyes darting toward the exit as if he could outrun the digital truth echoing from the monitors. Judge Judy leans forward, her hands clasped, her expression transformed into a mask of righteous judgment. This is the physiognomy of an apex predator of justice, cold, calculated, and absolute. Mr. Sullivan, I say, my voice a low, vibrating hum of authority. In my 43 years, I have seen people try to use the law as a sword to bully the weak. But you didn't just try to bully Elena. You tried to turn this courtroom into a weapon to finish what the freezing rain couldn't do to her and her son. You sat in that car, listening to your own mother beg for mercy, and you decided that your ego was worth more than a human heartbeat. Mark tries to find his voice, but it comes out as a pathetic, high-pitched squeak. Your Honor, the dashcam. It was private property. You can't use that. I'm the one with the damaged car. I have the right to be compensated. I slam my hand onto the bench, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. You lost your right to talk about compensation the moment you lied to me about your mother. You claimed you were protecting her, yet the footage proves you were emotionally abusing her to justify your narcissism. But let's talk about the law, Mr. Sullivan. Let's talk about the doctrine of necessity. I turn to the gallery, and then back to the trembling man. In the state of Rhode Island, the law recognizes that protecting a human life supersedes protecting a piece of metal. Elena didn't vandalize your car. She utilized a stationary object in a life-or-death emergency to save her dying son. That scratch isn't a crime. It's a miracle of survival. Your lawsuit for $10,000? Dismissed with prejudice. The courtroom breaks into a wave of hushed whispers. But I'm not finished. I turn my gaze to the bailiff. Officer, I want the record to reflect that Mr. Sullivan intentionally fled the scene of a medical emergency involving a minor. I am referring this case to the district attorney for a full investigation into reckless endangerment and failure to render aid. Mark's knees actually buckle. He has to grab the edge of the table to keep from hitting the floor. The man who walked in here to take $10,000 from a widow is now facing a criminal record and potential jail time. This is the physiognomy of a privilege collapsing in real time. I look at Elena. She is still shaking, but for the first time, she looks up. The weight of the world hasn't been lifted yet, but the man who was trying to push her under the water has been pulled away. And as for the scratch, Mr. Sullivan, I lean in, my eyes burning. You will not only pay for your own repairs, but you will also pay Elena's legal fees and the cost of her time away from her job. You wanted to use the court to teach her a lesson? Well, consider yourself the star pupil of a very expensive class. But there is one final piece to this story. Because justice isn't just about punishing the bad, it's about healing the good. And what happened in the next 5 minutes would be the reason this case became the most talked about moment in television history. The courtroom stands at the edge of history. The air, once filled with the toxic fumes of Mark Sullivan's arrogance, is now cleared by the sharp lightning of justice. Judge Judy sits tall, her presence filling the room with a weight that is both terrifying and comforting. Mark Sullivan is no longer a man. He is a shadow, a hollow shell of privilege that has been cracked open for all to see. This is the physiognomy of a total moral collapse. Elena, I say, and for the first time, my voice is not just firm, it is warm. It carries the vibration of a mother's understanding. Look at me, look up. Elena raises her head. Her face is a map of 10 years of struggle, etched with the lines of sleepless nights and the invisible scars of loss. But as she looks at me, those lines seem to soften. The shame that Mark Sullivan tried to heap upon her is washing away, replaced by the quiet dignity of a woman who fought for her child and won. Elena, I am not just dismissing this case, I announce, my words ringing out like a bell of truth. I am ordering that the record of this trial be sealed regarding your personal information, but the footage of Mr. Sullivan's actions be made public record for the district attorney. Furthermore, since Mr. Sullivan was so concerned with his paint job, I am awarding you the maximum statutory damages for the emotional distress caused by his frivolous and malicious prosecution. I turn my gaze to Mark, who is trembling so violently the table is rattling. You wanted $10,000, Mr. Sullivan? By the time my order is signed, you will be lucky if you have enough left to buy a bus pass. Because in this courtroom, we don't just protect cars, we protect people, we protect mothers, we protect the memory of heroes like Leo's father. I pick up my gavel. This is the moment. The final strike. Judgment for the defendant. This case is closed. But as the cameras begin to dim, something happens that wasn't in the script of the law. I stand up from my bench. I walk down the steps, past the bailiff, past the court reporter. I walk straight to Elena. The gallery is frozen. No one moves. I reach into my robe and pull out a small embroidered handkerchief, the one I keep for moments when the law isn't enough. I press it into her hand. Elena, I whisper, loud enough for only her and the world to hear. Your husband would be so proud of the woman you are. And Leo? Leo didn't survive that night because of a doctor. He survived because he has a mother who refused to let him go. You are the hero of this story. I look at the muddy shoe, still sitting in its plastic bag on the table. It looks different now. It doesn't look like trash. It looks like a trophy. It looks like proof that no matter how much mud the world throws at you, if your heart is pure, you will always find your way home. Elena hugs me. It's not a formal hug. It's the desperate, grateful embrace of a woman who has been drowning and finally found land. As she walks out of the courtroom, holding Leo's muddy shoe against her chest like a diamond, the gallery rises. For the first time in my career, the applause doesn't stop until the doors swing shut. Justice wasn't just served today, it was redeemed. Because we remembered that under the black robes and behind the luxury cars, we are all just human beings, trying to find our way through the rain.